Hi guys, Sophia here from CoachSophiaFitness.com, and I want to talk today about how to exercise and strengthen the gluteus medius without triggering the piriformis. I get this question all the time, and it's often, while I'm trying to do the exercises and I'm trying to strengthen the glute med specifically, or the gluteus maximus, and do my exercises, but the moment I start to do these exercises, it triggers the performance and I can't continue and I feel like I'm going back to square one. So I wanted to talk about that because I know it's something that, we've all dealt with at one point. Some people are just dealing with it now. I've dealt with it years ago, and it was so frustrating because, I would feel better for a few days and then I'm trying to exercise again. And then the moment I start to do the exercises, I start to feel my glute pain again, and it's always that area. And it's, you don't know what to do. You don't know if you should be pushing through the pain or if you should be, if it's the exercise itself, or why is the pain coming out of nowhere. So I wanted to give you some tips to allow you to go back to exercising and doing your exercises without triggering the pain. So the very first thing I want to discuss here is I want you to understand the role of the piriformis muscle.
The piriformis muscle is a deep buttock muscle. It is a hip external rotator that attaches to the sacrum. The muscle accelerates and decelerates hip external rotation, abduction, and extension. And it also plays a major role in stabilizing the pelvis.
So as you are trying to strengthen the gluteus medius, the gluteus maximus, do your core exercises, whatever, keep in mind that each muscle has a specific role and responsibility, and you want to make sure that you're not compensating with that muscle. So because the piriformis is an external hip rotator, so when you are doing exercises like the gluteus medius and doing, for example, things like the side-to-side walks, be very mindful on how you're doing, how you're performing the exercise. So is your foot rotating out, going out, or are you keeping your feet straight? Because you want to make sure to keep your feet straight to perform that abduction movement.
So the side-to-side walk exercise is a great exercise to strengthen the gluteus medius, but you need to avoid bending your body to one side because that is a form of compensation and you're using the QL muscle here. So to do this exercise properly, you want to make sure you keep your body straight, so no side bending as you're moving, and keep your feet straight too. So don't turn your foot out to the side as you are walking.
You don't want to be externally rotating your foot, getting the piriformis working when it shouldn't be. I always talk that there's no isolation. The muscles, they do like to work together. But when we are dealing with pain, we really want to minimize and try to isolate as much as possible, especially when we're trying to do activation exercises. So activation exercises are all about trying to isolate as much as possible. And then when you're doing integration exercises, then you want to work the muscles together. But every time you're doing isolation exercises, try your best to not get the piriformis involved in the movement. So when you are, for example, again, I mentioned the side-to-side walks, any hip abduction, make sure to keep your feet straight. Don't externally rotate them. So these things will really help you work the muscles that you want to work without getting the piriformis involved. The next thing is you want to always do some self-myofascial release before you get to the activation exercises, because when you have very tight muscles, they can inhibit the other muscles that you are trying to work. And I've explained this in a video recently. So for example, if you want to exercise the gluteus maximus, but you have very tight overactive hip flexors, they are going to inhibit the gluteus maximus from working properly. And now you have this compensation happening. You're not doing the exercise as it's meant, and the muscles, they're not able to go into that full range of motion, and now the other stabilizer muscles, including the piriformis, are trying to kick in to get the job done. So now you have the piriformis being triggered due to compensation, because you haven't addressed those tight overactive muscles before you get to the activation.
And if there are any tight areas I can focus on. So if I press on a trigger point or an area that just feels very tight, I will slow down the rolling and I will just breathe deeply to relax that area and release. And if it, as you're pressing on the muscle, you feel that it's a little painful, just breathe deeply, breathe into your belly and relax the muscle.
So always make time for self-myofascial release before you do your activation exercises. It will warm up your muscles. It will release any trigger points that can be inhibiting, the gluteus maximus or gluteus medius from working properly. And it will also help you get more range of motion so that when you're doing the exercise, you're able to go into that full extension. You're not feeling blocked or, and I'm sure that you notice that sometimes, for example, if you want to do the bridge exercise and then you push up, but you can't go up higher anymore because you feel like your quads are very tight. Like it feels really tight that you can't push past a certain level. And sometimes that's due, that's because the quads are very tight and overactive. They're not allowing the glutes to go into that full extension. So make sure that you release the hip flexors first or any other muscles that tend to be overactive, including the latissimus dorsi, the quads, the hip flexors, the TFL as well, which is part of the hip flexor group. And usually it only takes about 5 minutes and it does help a lot. I have noticed that whenever I put some time into working the TFL before I do any glute exercises, that I never feel the piriformis. And a lot of times TFL pain will almost feel like piriformis pain because it's in that right side and it will radiate to the back of the hip. So I have a TFL release on the blog. I have received so many comments of people saying, you have no idea how much this release has helped me. Like for months, I've been trying to figure out why I'm having this side pain, and they thought it was actually the piriformis, but it was just the TFL getting really tight and overactive. And once they have foam rolled and worked on the TFL for a few days, that the pain just went away. And the next thing also is when you want to work a certain muscle group, make sure to take the time to learn about what those muscles do, their roles and their location, and what movements do they perform. So this will help you do the exercise right. So if you are trying to work, for example, your glutes, right? The gluteus maximus. You can learn a little bit of the location of the gluteus maximus, what it does, hip extension. It also performs external rotation, but maybe you just want to focus as much as possible on the extension to try to minimize the piriformis getting involved. So, when you learn about each muscle and its role and what it does, and you're able to work it properly because you know which movements they do, so you can add challenge to that movement and really train the muscle. Just remember that you shouldn't be pushing through the pain. I always say this and I'm going to continue to say it. Once you start feeling pain, the body is going to respond by compensation. It's a very natural process and it's supposed to happen because the body wants to protect that area from injury. So, when I broke my toe, I noticed this happening and it was crazy. Like, as much as I tried to walk on my foot, I couldn't because it was painful. But just that act of having my foot flat, it was impossible. My foot was just rotating. I lost complete ankle mobility, and that's normal because that's how the body wants to protect that area, to force me to stop using my foot so it heals. So it's just a natural process. When you are gonna feel pain, your body's gonna figure out a way to move without using that area. And that is called compensation. So when you are feeling pain and you're pushing through the pain, you are compensating. And that should not be the goal. So when you feel pain in an area, just take a break for that day and kind of reassess what you were doing. Go back to the exercises, figure out why, like which exercises triggered the pain. What did I start with? Maybe change your routine a little bit. If you're warming up using the treadmill, maybe stop doing that, because a lot of times people, they warm up using treadmill or walking or jogging, but they don't realize that actually you're just working your hip flexors. Yes, you are getting warmed up, but you're not releasing any trigger points. It's, when you're dealing with pain, you want to follow like a strategic way of warming up. For me, it's always self-myofascial release, sometimes stretching, but not all the time. Usually the self-myofascial release will just be enough. And then I do the activation exercises, and also to keep track of all of the exercises that you're doing that don't trigger pain. Those are great things. So you have to always be tracking things. Like if a certain specific exercise always triggers pain, write it down and see why that is happening. Is it because of the timing? Like, are you doing this exercise because you're starting with this exercise? Are you including it at the end when your body is just too overwhelmed and it's just too much? Try to keep track of these things, because this was how I was able to work out without pain. It's like I had to figure out the correct order that I had to follow that my body responded well to. The amount of exercises, is it 2, 3, 4? How much is too much? And also the frequency throughout the week. And always keep track of these things. Like, if you don't keep track of these things, who will keep track of them? It is your responsibility to track these things. And after a while, you will learn so much about your body, so much about the things that work well for you, that you will be able to know when to do certain exercises and when to avoid them. And I will link to a few other blog posts that I wrote specifically about figuring out if the piriformis muscle is tight, needs to be released, or the opposite, if it's weak and needs some strengthening, because you do want to figure out these things first before you start to do exercises without knowing why you're doing them. You want to always have a goal in mind, and like a purpose for each exercise. Like, I'm doing this to release this muscle, I'm doing that to activate this muscle. It's all about knowing your body, knowing the muscular imbalances that you are working to fix. So I really hope this was helpful. I will put all of the links to the other piriformis specific articles and videos below in the description box. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know, and I will see you guys soon.